Nice to see you all, and the few you are here. I suppose it's because I didn't announce it. There were a few people, but anyway. So we'll jump right back in, page 160, and give me a word. And so we're on John the Theban number 2, and there's a saying. They're talking about this one elder who was extremely sick. And his disciple was constantly serving for 12 years, and he never, but this elder never said, "May you be saved." And in those days, the phrase "May you be saved" was the way you say thank you in monastic terminology. But then finally, when he was about to die, this elder took his hand and said, "May you be saved, may you be saved, may you be saved." And he said to the other people, this disciple, he's an angel, not a man. So I guess the lesson here is that these elders. I mean, sometimes, I mean, the natural thing to do, of course, is to express your gratitude to people right at the moment, but then, and that's sort of the natural level. The contra-natural, the against nature, this is like the passionate state, is not to give gratitude at all. But then the supernatural state was what they were doing. This is something where, because this elder had the discernment to see that the disciple would actually be benefited by being patient and working without even being thanked for his efforts, he intentionally withheld his gratitude all those years. And so, of course, this is something, it'd be very risky to imitate that kind of thing, but it just goes to show this is the kind of the otherworldliness, this otherworldly attitude they had, where they weren't just on a natural level of, okay, well, someone does something, I'll say thank you, but they moved beyond that and say, okay, well, actually, in order to help this person even more, I'm not going to thank him. And I suppose there might be times when even a parent could have a similar approach to their kids, where there are times when saying, bravo, good for you, you did great, would be a good encouraging thing to say. But I'm guessing there might even be times when delaying saying that might make them even try even harder. So that's a, I don't know. Do you have any comments on that? Because obviously I've never raised children, so
Neither.
Yeah. So okay. So I guess we're
actually, Father.
Yes, Tim.
Hi, Christ is risen. So since you asked for comments, I wasn't going to say anything, but it was in my mind. I think we should err on the side of affirming people, especially if they're children looking to us. And part of this, it's my fault I didn't finish my doctorate at Oxford, but part of it was I didn't think I was doing that great a job, because college those, rarely said more than, hey, that's okay. And once he said it was well done, and I felt damned by faith praise, and I felt like, oh, I'm not doing any good. But then I found out later, like pretty much after I gave up, that he thought my work was great, and he had told other people that. But in his surely God-given wise way of probably not wanting to inflate my already enough big ego, he left out affirmation that made me feel sort of like I'm no good. And it would have been a help to hear from the great man, which I finally did later. Oh, gee, Tim, you're using your gifts and glorifying God, and this is great. So forgive an egocentric anecdote, but I just, I know there are wiser people on the call than I am, but I would just encourage people in authority or parents to let kids know they're doing a good job.
No, and I agree with that. I mean, I agree that the right kind of encouragement is definitely a good thing. This is more of what we're hearing in the Desert Fathers is, and there's probably something you notice a lot of times. They give these examples that illustrate something to an extreme that you probably wouldn't want to actually implement unless you really know what you're doing. But it's good for the sake of having the sense that, oh, well, there is actually, sometimes it is good to withhold praise.
I think it goes back to what you were saying about it's the type of praise you give.
Yeah.
Like, to kids. I mean, I work in education and I find myself being very careful with the type of praise I give to kids. As much as they want to hear like that they're always doing a good job,
Yeah.
I find myself just not saying anything sometimes, but
Yeah.
when they truly go above and beyond,
Yeah.
right? But I think it's like monitoring like what they're doing. And it's not just always like, oh, here you go. And oh, that was fantastic. Here's that. And here's
Yeah.
that. And I feel like then that's that expectation. I remember just growing up, we were 3 girls and my parents were extremely strict. And we rarely heard praise from my dad, like rarely, but when we did, it was like, oh my God, that was like
Earth-shattering.
amazing. Yeah. So, but it was like, those little seeds that he would give us here and there that would keep us humble, like keep us
Yeah.
very just, kind of scared of him, but at the same time, we knew that he loved us, like he loved us. So I think that's always really important, is just having that.
Yeah.
It's not too much, but it's not too little. So I agree with I don't know who's on the call.
Yeah.
Who?
Tim,
Yes. Definitely need to give praise, but
Yeah.
maybe don't overdo it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, I mean, also you giving constructive criticism and really calling out someone who's not doing well can actually also be very important. And and I can speak from my own experience, because when I was in high school, everything was easy for me, and I didn't really have to try, and I got good grades. But then when I went to a tough school, I just figured, okay, I'll just do the same thing. I'll just not really try hard and just still get good grades. So there's one class in my freshman year. It was a reading class. It was English class. And of course, so you have to read all these books and then they ask you questions about it at the end. And well, I just didn't really read the books. and so I actually failed that class. And it was the first time in my life I ever failed. Yeah. It was just like a slap, like, wow. And this is I have to really shape up here. And so it totally did, get me on make me shape up. And then from then on, I got good grades. So, but sometimes you need, it's some harshness. And later I saw that English teacher who failed me. I was like, I'm really glad you failed me because I needed that.
And didn't you say there was maybe like a monarchy who like needed to give somebody some like negative criticism? Yeah. Didn't you say there was like this monarchy who had to give one of her maybe one of her sisters some criticism, and she would always start with "I love you."
Oh yeah. So what the story was is that there's this one novice who was would get triggered sometimes when she would get corrected just straight out, like, hey, you left that thing there or whatever. But whereas she noticed that if she could feel love before she's corrected, then she would very easily accept that correction. And so she asked the sisters, please, if you have to correct me something, please tell me you love me and then correct me. And it worked. Yeah.
And maybe the kids need the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Like they need to hear that you love them, but also you need to like put them in the correct path.
There's this saying of Theodore Roosevelt. I think it's very wise. It says, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So until they know that you care for them, they're not going to listen to any kind of correction. So it is important to show empathy and understanding and care before you start correcting. Okay, so moving on to page 161. There's a really scary story here. Isaac of Thebes, #1. So here, Isaac, this monk was once visiting another monastery. He saw some monk doing something that wasn't okay, and he had just a judgmental thought about him. And then when he came back to his cell in the desert, there was an angel standing in front of it and says, "I'm not letting you in." And the monk's like, "What? Why are you letting me in my own cell?" And he says, the angel said, "God sent me to say to you Tell him, where do you bid me put the brother who is at fault, the one you judged? And the reason why is because this brother actually just died. This monk he had just judged. He died, and so his soul needed now to be judged, either to be saved or not saved. And so immediately, this Abba Isaac realized, who am I to decide that this person deserves to go to heaven or hell? And so he just immediately fell on his face, prostrated himself, and said, "I have sinned. Forgive me." And then the angel says, "Get up. God has forgiven you, but take care in the future not to pass judgment on anybody before God passes judgment on him." Yeah, and so that it is tremendous, serious thing. I mean, of all the things that if we look at all the commandments of Christ and make a list of them, they're not. It's not like there's hundreds and hundreds of them. There's just a couple dozen, really. And one of them is, judge and you will not be judged. And so it is something extremely important in God's eyes. And I believe the reason why it's so important not to judge, it's not like God is like possessive of his ability to judge people, and he doesn't want anybody encroaching on his authority. But it's more of the problem is that when we're judging people, when we're having judgmental thoughts, we're not loving the person. We're not viewing the person as God views them, with compassion. And that's the real problem, because as soon as we stop loving people, that's when we start judging. And so in other words, when Christ says, do not judge, this is basically another version of saying, love your neighbor. Interesting. Yes.
What is like truly a judgmental thought versus like a thought that just comes into your head, whether it's your own or logos? So for example, like, is judgment if you really are like, oh, this person and does XYZ things, or like, let's say someone comes to church wearing like a baseball cap, and you immediately just notice, okay, person's wearing a baseball cap, and then you think to yourself, oh, well, maybe they're Protestant or they don't know the things. Like, what is?
Yeah, so that is a very important thing, because we do have discernment. We should discern between right and wrong, and so that and in Greek there's similar sounding words for discernment and judgment. Discernment is diakrisi and judgment is katakrisi. And so the way we can distinguish between the two of them is to see what's going on in our heart. If we have compassion for the person who's doing something that's not right, well, we know we're not judging the person.
Oh, okay.
And so, but if we don't feel sorry for this person, and not in the sense of I'm this up on this lofty throne of virtue looking down on this pitiful person way down there, I feel sorry for not that kind of sorry for feeling sorry, but feeling sorry, genuinely feeling for the person and saying, yeah, I know what it's like to have a passion or to be ignorant or whatever it is that this person has, and to really have genuine compassion, and then there's no judging. So. Okay, so moving on now to the bottom 161 and 162, it talks about how this same Isaac, the same Isaac, he would after the service, in other words, after liturgy, he wouldn't go, he would just run away and not hang out and socialize at all. And so they would ask me, hey, why are you running away from us? What? And he says, I'm not running away from the brothers, but from the evil craftiness of the demons. And he says, for if a person has a lighted lamp and hangs around, standing out in the wind, it is extinguished by it. So we who are lightened by the Holy Spirit in the Holy Eucharist, if we hang around outside ourselves, of course these are monks here, our mind is darkened. And that was something and Saint Gregory Palamas also had a similar kind of understanding. And in one of his homilies that he gave to people in Thessaloniki, in the big city, he said that this is actually a very there's something, if you see someone doing this, it's a sign that this person's really at a high level of virtue. In other words, that they're so connected with the grace they got in receiving communion, that they just want to just run away and have some peaceful prayer time. So he says, this is what St. Gregory Palamas said. He said, when you come out after the dismissal on the Lord's Day, on Sunday, liturgy, and are at leisure from earthly work for the sake of him whose day it is, carefully search to see if there is an imitator of the apostles who, immediately after the resurrection, mostly stays indoors, longing for God with silent prayer, psalmody, and other suitable practices. Approach such a person and enter his small room with faith, as though you were entering a heavenly place containing the Spirit's sanctifying power. But I think we've probably talked about this also before, how, there is a time also for socializing, and one problem about our contemporary culture is that most of us won't see each other at all, except on Sundays or after church. Whereas in the old days, the people you would see in church are the same people they would be right living in the same exact area and would be working with and dealing with and seeing. So there were plenty of times to socialize outside of the time right after communion. But again, it's one of these things, these principles, that it's good to have this in mind, to say that, okay, yeah, it is important to take advantage of this time to be more collected. And I don't have to be completely silent, but I don't want to go to the other extreme of just chit chat and blah, 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 empty stuff either. Okay. Now for 162, Joseph of Thebes, he said that there are three things that are precious in the sight of the Lord. He says, when a person is sick and temptations come upon him, he accepts them gratefully. The second is when someone renders all his deeds pure in the sight of God with no human element in them. And the third is when someone is living in submission to a spiritual father and renounces all his own desires. And he says, this person has an extraordinary crown, but he says, but I preferred sickness, which is kind of cute. It's sort of like he gets to choose if he gets to be sick or not, but anyway, yeah. So, I think the common thread between all three of these, though, is that all three of them, have a deep faith in God, which equals, trusting and loving God. And that's why they're so valuable. In other words, being patient in your sicknesses and temptations, or doing all your deeds pure in the sight of God. In other words, completely following all the commandments, or completely submitting yourself to a spiritual father. Yeah.
How do you get to the second? The second one seems like impossible. And
it's a little
no human element.
It's a little cryptic too, because a lot of times these sayings, they don't have the whole context, and they're assuming we understand what they mean. I'm guessing what he means when he says the second of these three is when someone renders all his deeds pure in the sight of God with no human element in them. I assume what he's talking about is not is getting past vainglory, and because a human element is doing what you think people would expect you to do, and looking good and for their sake, and which often fosters some sort of pride also. So this is, it just goes to show that there is a tremendous value in being patient with sickness or temptations, if you can accept them with gratitude, because that just shows that you really do believe that God's providence is guiding your life.
But they're not exclusive of each other, right? It's
Which
not like
ones?
those things, they're not exclusive of each other.
Oh,
it's not
yeah,
like
yeah.
you have one, then okay, I'm not gonna obey my spiritual father, and I'm not gonna live like in chastity completely or whatever. But I'm gonna get sick. That's where I get it. So it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and in fact, one of the Holy Fathers said that it's better to have a little bit of all the virtues than to have one virtue really strongly and none of the others. Because what ends up happening if you let's say you're really good at keeping the fast, for example, and you're really good at not lying, for example, but and you're like perfect with that. You've never broken the fast and you've never told a lie. Okay, well that's very good, you know. And but then suppose you do some other, you know, serious sin, like let's say you're constantly judging people all day long in your head. Well, then even though you're not doing those two bad things, this one bad thing is so bad that you can actually even lose your salvation for it. I mean, if it's something where it's a passion that's really strong. So yeah, that's why it's better to have a little bit of everything. And yeah, and you can't really choose. You can't neglect these things. Yeah.
You've met a lot of people who are going to be saints. Is that what you've like observed in them, that they have a little bit of everything?
Oh, they had a lot of
Everything.
everything. I mean, like yeah, in the family, he had a lot of all the virtues, and yeah, and that's typically what happens with these very holy people, because they you know, they're constantly correcting themselves. They're constantly on the lookout. They're very watchful, not only in terms of mentally being aware of, okay, what's a sin and what's not a sin, but also with the feeling of their heart, they're able to just even get a feeling or a smell of something. They can tell just by the smell of something that it's not okay. And so, yeah, and then of course they have very high standards for themselves.
Is that like a charisma that they have? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I guess it's something that comes with experience, even people who aren't saints. I mean, perhaps you might even have this sense. I mean, take some passion, let's say the passion of gluttony, for example. When you're eating just in a regular way, you're just getting your regular nourishment. The food might taste good or bad or whatever it is, but you're just eating it regularly, and that's okay, yeah. But then there are times when something just tastes so delicious or just so enticing, and you have this magnetism pull toward it, and you have that certain feeling even in your whole body of being like pulled over to that's the kind of feeling you can observe in yourself and say, hey, wait a second, what's going on with me? I got this like I'm being, and so then you can get a sense for what that feels like, so that next time it happens, you say, hey, wait a second, I have the same kind of thing happening. And I would say the same thing happens with all the passions, whether it's like a passion of anger, certain feelings will come, or the passions of vainglory and pride, you know, a certain feeling will accompany that. And so you can tell even just by the feeling you're having in your body what kind of temptation is coming at you. And so yeah, so I don't think it's a supernatural gift. It's just a matter of just observing yourself. Okay. So now I'll jump up to 163. There's actually something quite interesting here. So an Ishirion, they're asking him, yeah, you want to close the door, yeah. They're asking him, how are we doing in terms of carrying out the commandments? Are we, where do we stand? And he said, well, he said, have carried out the commandments of God. And then he asks, okay, well, what will those who come after us, what will they accomplish? And he said, those who come after us, in other words, the monks of later times, they will attain the half of what we have done in terms of living the virtues and fasting and praying. And then they say, well, what about the people who come after them? And he said, those of that generation will do no work at all, no godly work at all. Temptation is going to come upon them, and those who are found to be tried and tested in that age will be found greater both than us and than our fathers. So what he's saying here is that as the centuries pass, the spiritual level of monks is going to go down and down and down, and in the end they'll have no virtue at all, but they'll somehow be found, they'll end up being greater than the people who are praying and doing extreme fasts in the early days. And so the reason for this, and this is something Elder Ephraim also would talk about, he would say that the reason why is because in the old days, and even just like 100 years ago, there are so many good examples of people all around. For example, when Saint Joseph the Hesychast was growing up, he was born in 1897 in an island in Greece, Paros, and he remembered when he was growing up that when it was Lent, the people in the village would tell him and the other kids, hey kids, stop playing and making so much noise, running around so much. It's Lent, you got to tone it down. And so there's just this whole atmosphere, this whole environment, this society where Lent matters, and it's not just a matter of what you eat, it's a matter of your whole behavior. And so that's just one example of how the people in those days, there really was a deeper piety. But even in America, where it wasn't even Orthodox, there weren't even really many Orthodox people. I mean, back in, let's say, the 50s, if you didn't go to church, whatever church that was, it'd be like, whoa, what's wrong with them? They're not going to church. Is it like, whereas now it's the opposite. So there is a lot of peer pressure to not go to church now, whereas now, in the old days there was, and not just by matter of going to church, but just in all kinds of virtues. And in general, all the virtues were things that were respected and looked up to in the old days, and now it's really the opposite. The more deviant and off you can be, the more attention you get, the more likes you get, and more so it's all very upside down now. And so as a result, it takes tremendous effort just to keep above water, and just to not drown in this very sinful world we're living in. And because it's so much harder, that's why there's also so much more reward now, because a person doing for us just to keep from major sins, it takes the same effort, or maybe more than in the old days that these saints were doing to fast for, let's say, 40 days or whatever they're doing. Yeah, and so and that's why Elder Ephraim would say, in the old days you'd need a score of 80 or even 90 out of 100 to be saved, whereas now you can be saved with a score of 30.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's just, there's some more prophecies about the end times I just share with you because it's actually a very interesting topic. What?
I'm ready. You ready?
Yeah. So Saint Anthony the Great, he prophesied, a time is coming when people will go mad and crazy, and when they see someone who is not crazy, they will attack him, saying, "You are crazy. You are not like us." And it's not hard to see that we're already there. It's like you say, "Oh, there's only two genders, man and woman," and then they'll say, "No, you're crazy." There's all kinds of Anyway, yeah. And here's another prophecy from Abba Pamvol. He was once asked, "Is it true, Abba, that the customs and traditions of Christians will change, and there will be no priests in the churches in the end days?" And then the elder answered, "In those days, the love of many will grow cold, and great distress will fall upon them. There will be raiding of nations, migrations of peoples, unstable kings, rulers will be corrupt, the priests will become prodigals, and the monks will live negligently." And then he goes on and says even more. He says, "The clergy will be indifferent concerning their own salvation, but also that of their flock. All of them will be ready to run first to the table, and they will be quarrelsome, lazy at their prayers, but eager to criticize and ready to accuse. They will neither want to imitate nor listen to the lives and counsels of elders, but mostly they will be all talk and say, 'Had we lived in their days, we would fight too.' The bishops of those times will again be subservient to the powerful," the worldly kind of people, "and they will make decisions according to the gifts they receive. They will not defend the poor when they are accused. They will grieve the widows and harass the orphans. Infidelity, immorality, hatred, enmity, jealousy, strife, theft, drunkenness, rampant entertainment." Well, that's interesting. That's what we have here now. "Adultery, fornication, murder, and robbery will also enter into people's lives." And then when this brother heard this, he said, "And what can one do in such difficult times?" And then the elder answered, My child, in such days, the one who wants and tries to save his soul will be saved, and he will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, so,
The priest told me once at the end times, it'll be just enough to say that you believe.
yeah,
that will-
yeah.
That's how
yeah,
bad it will be that.
Yeah,
And wasn't it Saint Gabriel or Saint Paisios that said that love will save those in the end times, those who love others?
yeah,
will be
yeah.
saved.
Why do you think it's accelerated so much the past 50 to 100 years, that this degradation?
Yeah, well, I mean, one theory is that that and this and I might be called a Russophile for this, but there is a theory that the things that Saint Paul mentions that the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist will not be able to enter into the world until that which restrains it is removed. And now, and there are some saints of the church who have said that that which restrains the Antichrist was the presence of the Christian emperor, and that was the Christian emperor of Byzantium. But then, as you probably heard out there, there's what the three Romes. The first Rome was, the Roman Empire, which became Christian. And then the second Rome was Byzantium. The third Rome is Russia, Moscow, and this is so because Holy Russia continued. It started in like 10th century and continued all the way up until the Bolshevik Revolution in the 1917. And that's when the Tsar was murdered and was martyred, and so some people have said that this is the time that sort of opened the floodgates, because the Tsar was the last sort of the stronghold holding back all the spirit of the Antichrist, and so and I think, I mean, at least historically, we can see that, yeah, things really, and when we got to the 20th century, after World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution, that's when things really went downhill and faster and faster.
The question is maybe sort of similar, but like you'll see now that a lot of people get very confused with our faith and different things. So, for example, online there's a forum I'm in. It's like Ask an Orthodox Priest, but other people can respond if the priest agree that, yeah, okay. And so, and you get a lot of people who inquirers and stuff who want to know things, which is nice, and they're trying to find out. But like I noticed the other week, I saw a priest answer a question, and then I was like, well, actually, I don't even know the answer to this, and I started getting confused, and then people were like fighting, and it broke out into this thing where, yeah, it's intense. Where the priest was saying that you can't, because people were like saying, may the Pope's memory be eternal, he died, and he was like, you can't call any Catholic, this is an Orthodox priest, you can't call a Catholic heretic. If anybody here calls the Catholics heretics, he'll be condemned, we'll cut off the comments and he'll be kicked out. It has to be by an ecumenical council. But then I went and Googled it, and then there was like saints who say it's not just schismatics, like they're heretics because of the filioque. But it bred this whole thing of confusion where then people are fighting and nobody knows the faith and stuff like that. Like, how do you traverse these waters? I guess I'm asking, because like I would have been like, I'm not judging them, but heretical, like in a sense, right? Like,
Hasn't there been a council on that?
He was saying there's no council, but then I was like, he's like, unless you can prove there's a
No,
council.
probably he doesn't accept the council that was there. That's another
He said
issue.
that all the councils say schismatic, but St. Mark, was it Ephesus or one said that.
Yeah, okay, so here it is.
I need to know the answer.
So it says the Roman Catholic Church has been condemned unequivocally as a heresy by the Constantinopolitan councils of the years 1170, 1341, 1450, 1722, 1838, 1895, as well as by Saints Germanos of Constantinople, Saint Gregory Palma, Saint Mark of Ephesus, Saint Simeon of Thessalonica, Saint Paisios of Elchkowski, Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, Saint Cosmas at Delos, Saint Nicaros Kandopoulos, Saint Justine Popovich, and many contemporary elders.
5 consuls, so he
Yeah.
didn't know he
But all these other
delivered-
priests came to his defense, and then I'm just saying, so like here we're in this end times where you do have people who are obviously saying
Yeah.
incorrect things that don't match.
I find a very pro-pope mentality amongst the clergy
Yes.
and the hierarchy, honestly. I always thought that you couldn't say may your memory be eternal only to Orthodox Christians.
Yeah.
That's what I was always taught.
Six bishops came out, including the Bishop of Jerusalem, and wrote these long letters about how he's this
And may his
holy
memory
man
be
and may his
eternal.
memory be eternal. And I was like, I mean, we want everybody to be saved, but I was super
I know that I'm
confused.
torn because I'm like, okay, I don't want to harass him. He
Yeah,
passed away.
yeah,
You want to pray
Yeah,
for him,
yeah,
but
of
like,
course. I was so
Yeah.
confused why they were,
Yeah,
or
I
what we
mean,
do about it.
it's interesting. I mean, Saint Cosmas at the Los, in one of his and he has a bunch of these prophecies about how the end times will go. And at one point he says, we should curse the Pope because he will be the reason. And now, but he didn't fill in the blank of the reason for what. And
But did
many,
it come before? What was written before? This sentence wasn't finished, like to something that came before.
so he will be the reason. So if the context was more like he will be the reason why the Antichrist will gain
Oh, yeah.
power and everything. So, but that's an interpretation. So, but anyway, now but then another good question is, can a person who's not Orthodox become holy? And I think it would actually be a mistake to make a blanket statement and say that holiness is to say salvation is impossible for non-Orthodox to achieve, because we see many examples in history of people who were not Orthodox who actually ended up being saved. There's a very interesting story from Mount Athos. There was a monk who was in his cell, and he was just going on a monologue, sort of ranting. I was saying, oh, that Plato and that Socrates, they messed people. They taught about all these deities and he just and then that night he has a vision in his sleep. He sees, I think it was Socrates, and who is in glory in heaven. And he's saying, and Socrates said to him, why are you railing against me? I did the best I could with the little I had, and because God saw my heart, and he put me with the righteous. And that's why, in fact, in Mount Athos, in the narthex of one of the oldest church in the Protaton, they have all the saints on the frescoes inside the church, but in the narthex, which is like outside the church, they have all the philosophers like Plato and
and
Socrates.
I was just in Madeira last summer in the same thing in Great Lavra. They had all the philosophers, and then it just moved into St. Paul, St. Peter,
Yeah.
kind of like a procession of how it
Yeah.
evolved.
Yeah.
But what do we
Yeah,
do?
Father.
Yes, Tim.
Oh, okay, thanks. Sorry to interrupt my sister there. Yeah, the way I heard that story, or maybe it's a different story, is Socrates or whoever it is in the story I heard says, okay, I made mistakes. I was doing the best I could. But when Christ came to preach to the spirits in Hades, I was the first to believe it.
Yeah.
So that, but also, by the way, just to back up, because I think too, God can save people outside fullness of the church. We know where the church is. We don't know exactly what God does outside of it, but that was a wonderful summary of the condemnations of the heresy of the filioque. And the church has spoken with one voice, including the councils, that it is a heresy. Where was that summary you read to us? Of the
Oh,
council?
is it my book? The best book in the.
Oh, sorry, I haven't memorized it yet, but thank you for that.
Yeah, you just look in the index, which is really awesome because I did it myself. and you look up Roman Catholics, and it's the first entry there. It's in a footnote. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Glory to God all around. Glory to God for you and that and everything.
What do
Yeah.
we do as laity then in the end times when people are so pushing the ecumenical thing, and to say that we're wrong if we're like, hey, this is a here, like I'm saying what the fathers have said, you
Yeah.
know, like.
Yeah, the way to be, we can't come at these people saying you're wrong, I'm
Yeah,
right. And well, we can't do that with any disagreement. You always have to, if you want to convince someone, you give them the evidence for what conclusion you've reached, and then let them reach the same conclusion. And if you want to be really suave, you can do the Socratic method of asking questions and say, well, why would we not say it's a heresy if all these counts and all these saints say it was? And then, so yeah, but the key is being able to be educated so that you know that because I mean, all the other people in that forum, you know, they probably didn't read this book, this great book, because it's probably not that great as I think it is. So they you know, so they don't know about all these little details, and so yeah, that's why these online forums can be a little dangerous when it goes into these things that the average person might not know.
How do you combat, like, you know, when someone told me, oh, the Pope passed away, and I was just like.
The Pope passed to what?
When he passed away, my first thought was just like, yeah, what do I care for? You know, and that was bad too, you
My
know,
salvation.
like that was bad too. So how do you pray for?
Yeah,
you know?
so I mean, he's a human being.
Exactly, that's what I was gonna say, but continue.
Yeah, and so he's a human, and so we have to have a compassionate stance towards all human beings, even if they're that leader of a heresy.
Yeah, exactly.
So for him particularly, who has an eternal soul, I mean, how can we not be sad if we were to find out that some person, no matter who he is not saved? I mean, of course that's so. But in terms of saying, well, we don't care. I mean, I do see where you're coming from in the sense that, you know, we have the Orthodox Church, we have the fullness of truth, and so it doesn't really matter to us what these other Christian confessions are doing or not doing, or saying or not saying, or
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
Yeah, so I was thinking the same thing, like, as much as, like, a hipsiki, right?
Yeah,
So
he has a
like,
soul. Yeah.
right, so he's got a soul, so like,
I know.
at the same time, I'm like, you know, like me, may God forgive him for his sins, because we're sinful, right? So, like, I feel bad, right? But at the same time, I'm like, he too has a soul who's going to be judged and gonna go through the same, like, Belonia and stuff that we're gonna go through. So I think
Toll
about
houses,
it
yeah.
that way, right? Like the toll
Yeah.
houses. So I think about it that way, like, you know, I do feel bad, like,
I feel
even
bad for
though.
having the thought being like he just.
Exactly, and then I was just saying, like, then doesn't that kind of get us right into that judgment of like, oh, I don't care about
No, but
him?
saying
Like, then
memory
that
eternal,
doesn't
where are we
demonstrate
dealing
love
with
for
memory
us.
Eternal, I think this
Maybe
will
a
push
different
it.
thing, right? Is it a different thing?
Yes.
Then may he be saved or memory eternal? What's the
So
difference?
I mean, we should when even the worst person dies, it's not bad to say, you know, may he be saved.
Yeah.
Not because he was such a holy, wonderful person, but because, you know, he has a soul and may he be saved. So it's not bad to wish and pray for someone's salvation. In fact, there's something interesting in the life of Saint Ambrose of Milan, who he once read about the Emperor Hadrian, who had done a very merciful thing and in his life. And Saint Ambrose was so moved by this deed of mercy that this emperor of the Roman emperor did. He said, "Oh wow, what a loving person for this." Even though he's emperor, he went and took care of some widow that was not doing well, and so he started praying for his salvation, because he knew that this emperor never believed in Christ. So he was praying and praying and fasting, and finally he heard a voice from God saying, "Okay, because of your prayers for him, I've put him in a good place now." So yeah, so there is salvation for the non-Orthodox. It's just very difficult.
So she was saying the toll houses. I had this thought the other week, when people like Protestant, you know, somebody who's not an Orthodox faith, they're like, you know, obviously as a convert, you're a convert. If we had not been converted or whatever, we don't get a guardian angel. So do you go to the toll houses without a guardian angel then?
Probably, yeah. I mean,
Oh, that'd be really bad.
Yeah.
I've also heard, Father,
I
from
mean,
a priest that it's harder for Orthodox Christians to be saved because we have the fullness of the faith.
Yeah.
And God will judge us even more than
Yeah,
the.
definitely. And maybe I told you about this one monk I'll tell you again. It's so funny. I was giving some advice to one of the monks in St. Anthony's because that was my job to help them with their thoughts. And so he was telling me, so I started explaining them some concept of the spiritual life that's important. And then halfway through he said, "Wait, don't tell me this. I don't want to be responsible for knowing this." So we are definitely, God does, God said very specifically to him, so from him to whom much has been given, much will be demanded. So it is a greater responsibility. Yeah.
So the same would work for like, because I think about this a lot. I have a cousin who converted to Judaism. Ooh. Bothered me so much.
Yeah.
Like it took me a long time to just kind of just get over it and just recognize like it wasn't my decision. It's not my life. I tried to intervene, but I probably like sinned pretty badly during that time. Anyways, so what happens to like does the same thing happen to like the Jewish people? Like,
so
what happens to them?
So I mean, well, St. Paul said that for people who didn't know Christ, God will judge them by their conscience, and their conscience will either reprove them or perhaps even justify them. And so that leads us to believe that people can be saved simply by following their conscience. Although at the same time, Christ also said, he who believes and is baptized will be in me will be saved, and he who does not believe in me and is not baptized will not be saved. So it's extremely dangerous to try to be saved without Christ. But at the same time, in terms of other confessions, I mean, what the Holy Father have to say is that there is some grace there. So, for example, let me just show you what Saint Sophrony of Essex wrote. Saint Sophrony was very firm in his orthodoxy, as all the saints were, and he said this: only the one and only Church, the Orthodox Church, can possess the fullness of grace. All the other churches, the heterodox churches, have grace due to their faith in Christ, although not the fullness of grace. So he's saying that there actually is grace in these other Christian confessions, whether it's Roman Catholic or Protestant. It's just they're missing out on a lot. And so this also explains why it is that there are even miracles happening in people who are not Orthodox.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. So I have a friend who is Jewish. I work with him, and he converted from Judaism to Christianity, not Orthodoxy, but Christianity, because he said something happened to him where he saw Jesus and he converted, and he's been going to his Jewish friends and telling him about this and questioning, like, is it wrong for me to believe in Christianity and to be a Christian now? And he's trying to like verify and like explain like him converting. And when he's asking his Jewish friends these questions, they can't explain like why they don't believe in Jesus. Like why?
Isn't there a prophecy that a bunch of Jews will be saved in the end days?
Because they convert.
St. Paul or something like that, they would convert, that in the end times will convert.
Because
Maybe, I
they'll
can't
believe.
remember.
Yeah.
It says like the remainder of Israel.
Yes.
They what?
Yeah.
It says the remainder of Israel, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh, the remainder of Israel.
And I'll just show you also something else that Saint Seraphim of Sarov said. He said that he said that the non-Christians who lived after the economy of Christ, the coming of Christ in the flesh, these could still partake of the Spirit of God on account of their God-pleasing seeking. And so, and there's an example of this in the book of Acts in the New Testament. You remember how there was Cornelius, who was someone who was of the Italian guard, which meant he was a pagan. He wasn't even of the Jews. He wasn't Christian either. But then God, he was such a good person that God sent him an angel and said, because of all your prayers and all your almsgiving to the poor, God sent me to tell you where the truth is. So he said, go to such and such house and you'll find a person called Peter, the apostle, and he'll tell you what the true way to God is. And so, these people who are genuinely following their conscience and doing good, God does work in them and help them. Okay, let's see. So let me just say a few more things about, let's see, do we have time? Yeah, we have a little more time. So there's just a few more interesting quotes about the end times I wanted to share with you. There's what Saint Paisius said. He said, seemingly small acts of faith would be counted as great because of the difficulty of the times. He said, in the last days, a person who simply preserves their faith will receive the crown of a martyr. And this also ties with what my elder would say. He said, when the end times are coming, the Antichrist is coming, of course, there'll be great persecution and we won't be able to buy or sell anything. And so some people are saying you should buy, store up food and water and anything. But yeah, Elder Ephraim was saying, well, yeah, you can do that. But most importantly, we have to prepare for is strengthening your faith before the end times, because the primary temptation won't be a matter of food, not having food, but it'll be a matter of losing even your faith in Christ. And then St. Pius went on to say, today's seemingly insignificant sins would have been considered grave sins in previous times. Back then, people had greater sensitivity. And he also said, difficult times are ahead. Great trials await us. Christians will suffer great persecutions. Meanwhile, it's obvious that people don't understand that we're on the verge of the end times, that the seal of the Antichrist is becoming a reality, as if nothing's happening. That's why Holy Scriptures say that even the chosen will be deceived. And just a few more from Saint Seraphim of Sarov. He said, what was done by the ancient Holy Fathers will be barely possible for the last Christians. And the last Christians, will receive crowns equal to those of the ancient fathers, not because of their works, but because of the intensity of their struggle. So that's what we were saying before. For us, just doing our daily prayers is as a huge accomplishment. For them, it's like, well, who doesn't? And then Abba Moses, another one of the Desert Fathers, he said, in the last days, those who are saved only by illness and sorrow. So I mean, sorrow in itself doesn't save us, and illness by itself doesn't save us. But it ties in with the one we heard earlier this morning about how being grateful in those kinds of things can make all the difference. And then Saint Sophrony of Essex said, in our era, salvation has become more difficult than ever before. In the past, the witnesses of God who performed unbelievable miracles were a daily occurrence. How did Peter, a simple fisherman with no education, suddenly become a teacher for the entire world? The Lord gave him power to raise even the dead by his prayer. And he said something else here also about the end time, Saint Sophrony. He said, there are prophecies from the Holy Fathers of the 4th century who say that in the last times, God will hide from people, from his faithful. He will hide from people their own spiritual state. In other words, he won't let people realize what their spiritual state is. And they will no longer work miracles in these end times, and they will feel as if they are forsaken by God in a state of emptiness. And yet, this is the only true way, as Saint Silouan writes, the way of tears. The most important struggle is with the passion of pride. All those who want to rule over people are wrong. They do not understand the authority of God. God himself does not want to rule over man. He is waiting for man in the freedom of his love for God to decide for himself like a God. And my prayer is that you listen to the word of Saint Silouan, who said, the way of the saints is the way of loving tears. And then Saint Sophronia concludes, where there is love, there are tears. And where there is no love, there are no tears. Yeah, so what he's saying is that God won't let us, so even if we are doing well spiritually, God won't let us see that now in the end times, because we'll be just too prone to falling into pride. But he's also saying that the sorrow that we'll have, or also the illnesses, these are things that can save us, as long as, of course, we have the gratitude that we are talking about. And as Saint Cyril said, the way of loving tears. In other words, having tears because of my sorrow, that I'm grieving God, that I'm not better. And even if we genuinely aren't doing well spiritually, these tears coming from love can actually fill the place of doing well in sort of absolute sense. Okay, and let's see. Let me give you just one more, and then we're going to running out of time. There's a quote. There's the last quote about the end time. This is from Saint Anatoly the Younger of Optina. It wasn't that he was so young. It was just he was the younger of two Saint Anatolies, and so he was in the early 1900s. Is that right? Early 1900s, Saint Anatoly? Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's early 1900s or late 1800s, though, at the earliest. Anyway, so Saint Anatoly had this to say. He said, from that, as I said, heresies will spread everywhere and deceive many people. The enemy of the human race will act with cunning in order to draw into heresy, if possible, even the elect. He will not begin by crudely rejecting the dogmas of the Holy Trinity, the divinity of Jesus Christ and the virtue of the Theotokos, but he will begin imperceptibly to distort the teachings and statutes of the Church and their very spirit, handed down to us by the Holy Fathers through the Holy Spirit. Few will notice these wiles of the enemy, only those more experienced in the spiritual life will. Heretics will seize power over the Church and will place their servants everywhere. The pious will be regarded with contempt. Therefore, my son, he said to this person, when you see the violation of patristic tradition and the divine order in the Church, the order established by God, know that the heretics have already appeared, although for the time being they may conceal their impiety, or they will distort the divine faith imperceptibly in order to succeed better in seducing and enticing the inexperienced into the net. True Christians will remain until the end of this age. Only they will choose to live. Only they will choose to live in secluded, deserted places. So yeah, so it's a very grim picture he's painting, and of course many of us. Yes, Tim.
Oh, forgive me. Was that in your book too, or where is that?
That's not. I don't know. It's right here.
Okay. Well, we can follow up. That's invaluable. I mean, that speaks to today.
Yeah. Well, since there's a file I have on my computer, what I'll do is when I send the announcement for next week's lesson, I'll just have this as an attachment in case you guys want to look to see that.
Yeah, that's invaluable. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I also put that thing I found in this wonderful book about the Roman Catholics. So.
Okay.
How do we not judge, like, so if we see all of these people, priests, hierarchs and stuff, in prayer services with Catholics and things like that, and obviously it's a heresy, but if you quote what you said, how do we know that we're correct without following the judgment?
Yeah, so again, this has to do with the difference between, as we're saying, catocracy and theocracy, discernment and judging. And so it has to do with our internal disposition. So if we can see these people doing these things with compassion and feeling sorry for them, that they don't have clear sight to realize what they're doing is a serious mistake, well, then we just feel pain of heart for them. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there was a very holy head of the Rovcore Church 40, 50 years ago. I can't remember his name, it was me, but he would write these sorrowful epistles regarding the state of all the ecumenism going on, and he wouldn't be bashing people for their ecumenism, but he would just be expressing his deep pain of heart for these betrayals he saw. And so having pain of heart is the real way to, and it's sort of like Christ too. I mean, like when Christ, he remember that time when he was in the temple, in the synagogue on a Sabbath day, and he said, "Okay, guys, is it okay to heal on the Sabbath or not? Is it okay to do good or to do evil on the Sabbath day?" And everyone just like, we're not answering that one. And then it says he looked around with anger, pain, with pain at their feeling pain at their hardness of heart. So yeah, so this is an example for us. We can be even angry about how these betrayals are happening, but also feeling sorrow at their hardness of heart. So it has to be tempered with that genuine, heartfelt compassion and sorrow for these people, that they have a hardened heart and they can't see these things that we're able to see. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll stop there. It's time. So let's see. So we covered. Oh wow, we covered 3 whole pages. Okay. So yeah, maybe. Well, yeah. I guess we'll just say we'll go up to 172. So we finished 163. So we'll cover from on the 164. So we'll cover next week from 165 to 172, and I'll include that in a message in the email I send you guys. All right. Well, thank you all for joining and for your good questions and discussion.